Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to welcome back Lilian Sue. Lilian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me back, Jen. I appreciate it.
I am so glad you're here. And you have some changes that have happened since we chatted last. So would you like to share?
Absolutely. I just released my debut nonfiction PR book, The Powerful Publicity Prescription, in late June. So the ebook and the paperback copies are out right now, and I'm just in the process of fulfilling all of the pre-orders. And, taking the book launch in increments. I'm going to be doing an online book party as well on the 20th later in July and just seeing where else I can take it with in-person events and collaborations and everything. And I'm really excited to just get the book out to as many people as possible and to see what everybody thinks, see how authors are going to take it and take action with it.
That is so cool. And congratulations. Very cool. So first off, I love the alliteration of powerful publicity prescription. How did you come up with the name?
Well, for a long time now, with other aspects of my business, like I have a PR course that I call the Attraction Blueprint, right? So I've been playing a lot with um, adjectives that sort of mean similar things: plan, blueprint, strategy. And I was thinking to myself, well, I want to make it memorable. I want to have publicity in the title, and I want to really reiterate how it's powerful, right? So I thought, powerful publicity prescription. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but the alliteration can kind of help people remember it a bit more, right? My husband loves to call it triple P.
Thinking that I could totally see like a play off of it to make it fun though, from that standpoint.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I came up with the name and just looking at, prescription as a different way of writing plan or strategy. And really that's what this book is about because it covers everything from like, here's the history of public relations, all the way to, so you've had an interview or a review go live. Let's talk about how you can promote it effectively to maximize that opportunity that you've gotten and also to keep your projects top of mind, right? So it kind of covers the entire gamut as an overview of the world of public relations.
Well, but you know what? Something that's in the context of health, prescriptions are utilized in a way to help provide solutions, to remedy or to aid or augment a healing process so that you are, in an optimized health, you're in a better state than where you were. So I also kind of hear a play off of that idea too, just from the idea of that author is looking to grow in their business. They need to augment, they need some other solutions, and they might need some aid or some support that's going to help get them to that optimized state of where they want to go. So that's kind of what I was taking away, even with the prescription element to it. So I was just curious how you came up with the name because that's what was coming up for me when I heard it. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I love that actually because it really is about giving them a plan and a strategy to optimize their marketing part of it and to tell what I refer to it as unlocking the superpowers inside their stories, right? To really get their books and their author businesses where you want them to go. And on the health side, I also really focus a lot on the mindset piece. Like you and I have talked about this before about just where recognizing what triggers things like your fear, your frustration, your imposter syndrome, how to push past those things. I give a lot of accessible tips, mindset mantras, affirmations that I use for myself and for my clients on a daily basis, because it's really about recognizing that without the mindset, you don't really have a strategy because no matter how much you plan, without even realizing it, if you're coming at it from a standpoint of, oh, this opportunity is not going to work out for me, or oh, I'm going to get up on stage and embarrass myself. If that's your line of thinking, you're going to start to sabotage your strategy, right? So, this book is really about giving authors the tools, the resources, and kind of the real world case studies that they can get inspired from, they can learn from, and take these tools to really take action on using PR to get their books out there.
Well, and the other thing that the way I'm deducing things, and just in this conversation, but also candidly with your title, what you've done is create the premise of the book in the title. So with nonfiction in particular, you really want to, you're clear about who that audience is you want to serve. And a lot of times you're coming from the space of, I understand there is a problem or a need that I want to provide a solution for, because you recognize that the reader is coming in at a certain point. Let's just go with the beginning part. And then they, as they're reading through the book, whether they read chronologically, sequentially, or if they read out of order, they still are looking for some kind of transformation. And by the end of the book, that promise that was set at the beginning, that promise that they were looking for from, as this book is part of that solution, the author has delivered. So what I also see that you've done well with the title is also demonstrate that very thing. Here's the promise that you, and the premise of this book, but here's the promise that you can receive from the book. And I think that that's something really important when thinking about nonfiction work in general, is recognizing who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, how you want to help them. So that's abundantly clear, because what that also will do is help readers who pick up the book to go, is this for me? Am I the right person? So you might have a writer who picks it up and says, this is cool, but I'm not there yet, because maybe I am mid-manuscript and I haven't even gotten it to, a real first pass of editing to feel like I can talk about this and do more with it. Or maybe they need some to read about it to figure out, how do I go about it? Or to your point about the mindset of going, oh, you want me to talk about it too? So that shift, you're helping them to pick it up and say, am I the right reader at this point in time? And even if it's a no for now, I look at that as not yet, but it's coming. It'll come back around when it is the right time. And that's okay too, because to your point about earlier with being top of mind, when the author is more communicative about their book and about their message and body of work, it will come back through. And that person who might have said, not yet, will get to a space of going, where are you? Please now. And you were top of mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I really wanted to write this book to inspire people to start thinking about it and then take action when they're ready, which is also why I've come out with a companion glossary that gives them more definitions of the terms that I've used in the book, and also a workbook as well that really kind of goes through every chapter and helps them brainstorm, gives them tips, and kind of gives them the space to be like, okay, I've read this. Now I think I'm ready to sit down and start thinking about it. Let me grab the workbook so I can actually start writing things down.
I love that. So what was that like, creating the companion pieces with the book? Like, how did you visualize that? Was the book happening first and then the companion pieces, or were the companion pieces starting to sprout up as you were writing? And it was one of those of, no, this doesn't belong in the book, but it belongs over here. So almost like kind of working them in tandem, but still the book took the front seat, if you will. How did you work that?
The book definitely took the front seat. I wasn't thinking about the companion pieces, I think, until I was in the second round of revisions for the book, because it was like, okay, having the book is great, but I really don't. This is not a book that I just want people to review for the sake of reviewing, or pick up, read it, put it down, and forget about it. I really want them to take action on what they've learned in the book while it's still fresh. So in order to do that, I started thinking about like, okay, if I'm going to do a glossary, because there's so many, and this was kind of inspired by like a content series that I had been doing on Instagram of posts that I would give people definitions of certain terms, right? And I was thinking like, having a glossary might really help reinforce some of the terms that they're reading in the book. And I wanted to make it a separate glossary because I was thinking, just putting it as an index in the back of the book, I'm trying to be a little bit more cost effective here. I think it might be easier to just do it as a separate glossary. And with that, I was talking to my mindset coach, who is also a business coach, and I had said to her, do I need to define every single term in the industry? And she said, I think it might be less confusing for people if you just focus on the terms that you use in the book for now, so that if they have questions about other things they come across during the process, they can ask you those questions.
Mhm.
And with the workbook, it was more of because I had created in the past a lot of free journals, workbooks, that sort of thing to go along with my webinars that I would present. I would give the journals or the workbook as a free gift to help people kind of jot down some of their thoughts on what they learned through the webinar. And I thought, maybe I could do that for the book as well to really help reinforce what they're learning, to give them a space in which they could write down all of their thoughts or help them push through any mindset blocks that they might have, things like that. And this particular workbook that I'm releasing is probably the most comprehensive one I've ever done because it covers all aspects of PR and it covers all chapters in the book. And I really go in depth into just how to recognize what triggers your fear and asking those questions that will prompt people to sort of think about it and write it down and really get deep and introspective. And at the same time, also going through, here's a like 2 pages full of nothing but tips that you can use to gain confidence to do interviews, to feel good about interviews, to keep the conversation going, how to deal with difficult questions, all of these kinds of things, right? So it's a mixture of practical, actionable tips with the sort of deeper introspective mindset piece that really can help them reinforce things with the expectation that, hey, I'm giving you these tools and these resources so that when these feelings come up again, you have that toolbox that's going to help you deal with it. This isn't meant to solve it permanently. This is just to give you the tools and resources that you need to get unstuck and keep making progress.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing too is the guidance that you receive from your business mindset coach. I agree with that. I totally love the fact that it focused in on what you were discussing in the book, to your point about like the terms you're using. But the other part of that is if somebody did have a question, you'd want them to reach out to you. And because then you can either suggest they go look at a certain part, you can give them that immediate answer. You could then refer them more specifically to, if you are wanting to learn a little bit more here, in this section of the book, I talk a little bit more about this from another angle, or here's something in the workbook that you could go and evaluate, something like that. But it basically creates conversation and community because it's allowing them the space to, hey, I have a question. Why not reach out and ask? And I think that that's really cool because I also believe authors start the process and then the reader is continuing that conversation. Maybe it's a question back to the author. Maybe it's talking to another reader who says, hey, did you read this? What did you take away from it? Or the other could be, I was reading this and I'm trying to apply it. If you read this and tell me what you thought, what do you think, kind of thing, so that you're really creating more conversation. And the other part, and especially with nonfiction, I think, but it really happens with any book, is that when you are reading that book, you're at a certain place in your life, whatever season that is, whatever experiences you've had thus far, you are reading it from that vantage point. And then let's say you pick that book up again in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years, you're at a whole new level. You have grown, you have, changed, you have improved, you have had more life experiences, and now you're coming from a new place. And that new place is going to read that same book that you read 6 months ago, 5 years ago, whatever that threshold is, that difference is, and go, wow, I'm looking at this now from a different point of view. I'm gaining more. Maybe I can go deeper than I did the first time because of what I've been through, because I have made some efforts to apply what I've learned. And now I can see where, oh, I touched the surface. There's more I can do. So especially what I hear you creating with the workbook, with the all the companion pieces, really with all three of them working together, that person could come back through and even make a little note, August 2024, I did this in the workbook. And then they come back and maybe look at it August 2025 and, how have I grown? What have I done? How could I do something differently? So I really think that's cool.
It was really about opening the door,
Mhm.
right, to that conversation, to that line of thinking, to
Mhm.
giving authors, because in my experience, so many of them get stuck when they don't feel like they have the right personalized tools and resources that they can really apply to their journeys as an author. Like there's so many fantastic resources and knowledge and expertise out there in education surrounding marketing and PR for authors. But where I find a lot of them get stuck, or at least the ones that have spoken to me about it, have been like, oh, I took a fantastic workshop or webinar and that knowledge was great. My problem is there's a gap there. I don't know how to apply what I've learned specifically to what I'm doing,
Mhm.
right? So this book is really about opening the door to that and getting them thinking about, okay, how can I get started on this? But, there's only, as you know, when you're writing a book, there's only so many case studies and so many examples that you can put in there. So it's really about getting them thinking. And then hopefully when they have questions, they know that they can always reach out to me.
I love that. So talk to me about what it was like to put this book together. Just write this first book. I mean, because when you are a debut writer and you're working on this first piece, that's a huge thing. And not that other books aren't. It's just that not that the subsequent books aren't as meaningful. It's just there's something really special about that first book because you've never done it before. So what was that like? Talk to me about your process.
Well, I mean, it all started when there was a lot of authors and entrepreneurs in my audience that were like, do you have a book? Would you ever write a book? Because they said, following you on social media is fantastic. I get the tips every day and everything. But they said, what I'm not getting is the whole picture. Like, I don't have a resource that I can flip through and refer back to if I think of something or I get stuck on something. So, is that something you would ever consider doing? I had a lot of aspirations about being a fiction writer for most of my life. And it's actually something separate from this conversation, but that's actually something that I'm working on concurrently with the release of this book. And this book is kind of my proof of concept on doing a book release and the marketing and the distribution side of things. But I started thinking, I thought, I've been sharing a lot of the same knowledge for years now. And I work with a lot of clients when I'm doing campaigns that have a lot of similar questions. Let's see if I can write a book that really gives them a powerful overview of how all of this works. So I started looking at a lot of the questions that my clients and people and entrepreneurs in my audience and authors would have about PR, that repeated questions that I kept getting and the things that they weren't maybe understanding or connecting the dots on. And I thought, this is how I'm going to set up the framework of the chapters for the book. The other thing I had noticed in the course of my research is that the bulk of the books out there on public relations are either your student textbooks or they're written for corporations and government relations,
Mhm.
which is fine. There's always going to be a place in the market for those types of things. But I thought, where's the book for the entrepreneur? Where's the book for the author, the solopreneur, the filmmaker, the small business owner, the nonprofit, the startup. All of these people are being left behind. And to me, that's not fair because they all deserve to have their stories heard. They all deserve that opportunity to learn how to build a strategy that's going to empower them to gain the confidence to get out there and build those relationships with the media and to build traction with their customers and their readers and to build trust, right? But no one can do that if they don't know what they're doing because people don't know what they don't know. And at a time and place where there's so much information on the internet, there's countless things that you can read, countless courses and webinars that you can sign up for. I really wanted to give them a personalized primer type resource that they could actually read it and see themselves taking action on, right? It's not so high level that it's like, oh, I can't do any of this unless I own a corporation. That was something that I really set out, like a really popular myth that I set out to bust with this book, because I always say to my clients and the authors in my audience all the time, you don't need an audience of the millions, and you don't need 20, 30, $40,000 to make this work. But what you do need is an understanding of what your goals are, what you want to share with people, who you want to get in front of, and an idea of how you want to do that. You don't need to have all the answers, but what this book's going to help you do is to help you find those answers. So it really started out as an idea because my audience was saying to me, hey, I'd love to have a resource that I can kind of flip through and refer back to and really kind of gain more of an understanding on what PR is about. So that's really how it started. And as I started writing, it's funny that because I talk with a lot of authors, even just socially, and I know how difficult it can be, particularly on the fiction side, for them to get that first draft down and to keep it going and everything. For me, it was more of how do I keep this to a high enough level overview so that I'm not overwhelming people? Because even as I was writing the first draft and I got that ready to work with my editor on, I started already thinking about a second edition. Like, what were the gaps in the knowledge from the first book that I didn't address in the first book that maybe I could put into a second edition to really round out that blueprint, that prescription, right? But I had to kind of rein myself in and go, okay, for this first kick at the can, so to speak, what's going to help people out that are just starting out? So, I kept it to, knowledge of the different types of PR. This is how you use them. This is what a media kit is. This is how you use it. If you are writing a pitch through email, these are the different things, the different elements you should consider, and the difference between pitching a TV show versus pitching a podcast, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. So then to your point, this second edition idea started creeping. Were some of those ideas distilled in a sense to go into this first edition, so to speak, or did they show up a bit in the workbook, or is it still one of those going, not still sure, but I had to write it or get those thoughts out, and they're in a holding document right now?
There's definitely elements that I would go more in depth into for a second edition that I touch upon in the first book and in the workbook. But it would definitely be like, okay, instead of like in the first edition, there might be a couple paragraphs on it. And then in the second edition, I might actually expand on it and do an entire chapter, right? Just because there's so many different nuances around certain things. Like I didn't talk a lot about influencer marketing in the first book, as an example. I didn't go really in depth into budgeting, as an example, because those things are so dependent on an author's needs, on their goals, on, different things that if I started going into so many different examples, it's like we'd be here all day. Instead of getting a book that's easily digestible, you'd get a 1,000-page textbook, right? And I was trying to really avoid that.
Well, and to your point though, you it doesn't even necessarily have to be a second edition for something like the influencer marketing. It could be like a special piece, like almost like its own short and sweet focused book, meaning whatever needs to go in for this specific type could be, hey, it's a part of this overall umbrella, but if this is where you're interested in focusing, this book is comprehensive just about this area. Because to your point, maybe not every author wants to have or do influencer marketing, but those who do, it gives them another resource. So there's different ways to your point about how to do that. I just love that the ideas were creeping. How do we manage that? Where do they show up when you have all of these cool things happening? Because as what I hear is the ability to say, okay, I'm excited about this, about who I'm serving, and have all of these ideas. And yet, how do I manage that? It's not just about being clear of who you're serving, it's also clear about the goal you have for that book. Because the first book, to your point, is really about I'm setting the tone, I'm setting the stage for this is what PR is and how to make it work for you. And really, it almost what I'm hearing you describe is kind of like the small business owner, entrepreneurs, 101 of PR kind of concept. Because to your point, it's closing that gap, but it is teaching those principles. And then there's another way of saying, okay, now we're going to go deeper, or we're going to focus in on this area because this is what you might be interested in or what have you. I love that. And I love the fact that you utilized resources that you had already previously created and then said, okay, bringing this back through, does it still make sense? Should it be included? If it should, what do I need to do to it or how do I need to work with it now to make it relevant to what we're doing? So to your point about the previous webinars or what have you, or different worksheets, just the sheer fact that you acknowledged your catalog of work before that and then said, how do you fit into this? I think that was a great thing to do, because when you are talking about something, you're talking about it so much that sometimes you might not realize all the things you already have. So I love that you did that. So tell me, what was it like to get the feedback on the cover? Like when you saw the cover come through, did you have the idea for your cover, or did your designer say, I've got some ideas? How did your cover come through? And then when you saw the one that becomes the book, tell me about what that was like.
I just want to give a shout out to my cover designer, Carolina Wodniak. She is amazing. We definitely put our heads together to brainstorm certain things because I said to her, I'm like, so many, like, I looked on Amazon first for cover inspiration within my industry. And I said, so many of them are super boring and super academic and technical and all that stuff. And I said, I don't want that. I want something that's going to capture the global impact of PR, but at the same time also give them my vibe, which I always feel like as a publicist and a PR coach, it's a lot more personal, it's a lot more casual, it's a lot more empathetic, right? Because I work with, when you're working with clients to deal with things like mindset blocks, you have to give them time, you have to basically meet them where they're at, right? And a lot of that tends to get lost in the shuffle when you are dealing with the business side of the strategy and everything. So I said, I really want to kind of get things that would combine those two things. So she first came up with a couple of different concepts. Like since you have the book, I'm sure you know what I refer to when I say this. But the globe concept was kind of more of the corporate global communication side, and I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. I really like the old school microphone that she had on there that made me think of old timely sports broadcasts and things like that. Being that I'm a sports fan, I'm like, I like that. I like the kind of ripped from the headlines newspaper vibe because that was really sort of, I wanted to illustrate in a more visceral way, this, that mainstream media still has a place within PR, but that,
Mhm.
that whole ripped from the headlines motif can also work for other forms of media as well. So I also reached out to my newsletter subscribers, and I even asked family members of mine that are in marketing, and I said, what do you think? How do you think this looks? Do you think it's giving the correct vibe? The one that had just the ripped newspaper motif on it, a lot of people were saying because it was more of a pink red background, because those are my brand colors. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's a little bit more feminine. I don't know if that's necessarily the vibe that you're going for. And I said, well, I want to illustrate, have my brand colors, but I don't want to alienate anybody because this book is for both men and women who are authors and who are entrepreneurs. So he finally said, and then I wanted my tagline to be prominently displayed there. So finally, one of my cousins said, why not see if you could combine the two? Like if it's possible, as opposed to her doing something from scratch, like have her mock something up, see if you like it. And then when she came up with that combination, I thought, this is perfect. This
Yeah.
has the vibe, the old school kind of broadcast global communications vibe, along with my more casual, rip from the headlines motif vibe that I really think works perfectly with this. So I really fell in love with the cover because I thought, this is memorable to me. It's not stuffy, it's not corporate. There's really nothing out there that looks like this that can combine both of those vibes. So I thought, this is me. And that's really what I wanted to share with anybody who reads the book is like, when you see the cover, when you read the book, like this is me. This is how I communicate. This is my vibe. This is not, I didn't have somebody come in and edit it and completely change the voice. All of this is basically me in book form.
I love that. That is really cool. And actually, to me, the thing that I like about the cover is the fact that a lot of authors want their books to be, beyond their country. They want readership to be beyond their state, beyond their country in particular. They are looking for a wider reach. And the other is that writers work with paper, even if it's online, they are still working with paper. And this writer and editor a lot of times will jot things down, rip things to move things around. So what I saw was just something that looked like very, relatable in that sense of going, I can't tell you how many times I will print something. And then if I need to move paragraphs, I will literally cut them out, move them around to if I like a different format. Just it's a way that kind of helped me. So seeing that made me think of it. So I think that's so creative. Lilian, this has been fantastic. Congratulations. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get your book?
Well, they can always connect with me on Instagram at Lilian Sue, copywriter PR. I'm there 5 days a week, posting strategic tips, answering questions, all of that kind of thing. They can find my book on my website at inretrospectwritingservices.com/books. And then from that page, you'll also be able to find a list of all the available retailers, or they can also buy the book directly from me. And I actually have the glossary and the workbook is available as well. And I'm starting to put bundles together so you can get all three books as well to really take action on the next step in building your strategy for your books.
That is cool. I think that's fantastic. Lilian, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Appreciate it.